Hey, it's Andrew at BTO Range. Again, thanks for coming back to the channel. Today, we have a neat little shotgun here on the bench. It's a pretty important gun for Remington. This is the Remington Model 31. In fact, specifically, it's a Model 31L for the lightweight alloy receiver. And we'll talk a bit about that in a second. This gun actually doesn't belong to us. This gun belongs to one of our viewers who lives locally that wanted us to do an episode on the Remington 31, so shout out to Gary. Glad you brought the gun by, and we'll knock this video out. And there's some interesting info here with this gun, and the lineage of this gun still exists today in even other manufacturers that took a lot of the design features of this shotgun and incorporated into stuff that's still made today. So the Remington 31, a little bit of the history behind that. Remington had slide action shotguns since the Model 10, the Remington Model 10, which was a John Peterson design. Bottom ejecting shotgun, the Model 10. Super complicated shotgun on the inside, which was typical of John Peterson, a remarkable firearms designer for sure, but he was kind of one of those guys that if one part could do the job, then certainly three parts would do the job better. So the gun is probably unnecessarily complicated. And then it evolved into the Model 29, still a complicated bottom eject shotgun. And during that time period, also, Remington had the Model 17, which was a John Browning design, another bottom eject shotgun, a little simpler, a little sleeker than the Model 10, the Model 29. And that gun eventually would become, after patents expired and what have you, it would become the Ithaca 37 with some changes. So the contemporary, or I guess the biggest competition of Remington at the time would have been Winchester. And in 1912, Winchester introduced the Model 12 shotgun, which was not even arguably, it's one of the best slide action shotguns ever made. And it really just, the Remington product up until that point in the 19 teens and 20s, really were taking a backseat to the Winchester in just about every, whether it was target guns, competition guns, field guns. The Model 12 was kind of the king of the bunch. And there were other guns out there. Savage had some stuff. Stevens had some stuff. But it really couldn't do anything with the Model 12. So Remington really needed a side ejection gun instead of the bottom ejection guns that they had before. So they had a dream team of designers that we talked about before on some of our Remington videos. Crawford Loomis was the chief designer, so they kind of turned the project over to him, said we need a side eject shotgun. So they took a lot of the features of the Model 17 and modified it to be side eject. Now, that said, it is not a Model 17 with an ejection port on the side. There's a lot of changes on the inside of the gun. But they took a lot of the design features, if you will, and created this gun that became the Model 31. So a little side note, Crawford Loomis was assisted in this regard by two other people. One, I've got his name here, Charles Barnes was one of the designers of that team. But the other person on that team was Oliver Loomis. And yes, they're related. Not only was Oliver Loomis Charles's brother, but they were two of a set of triplets. The third being Eugene Loomis. I don't know if he ever had anything to do with Remington or not, but I just thought it was interesting that these two triplets born in 1885, two of obviously a set of three, Crawford and Oliver Loomis, became gun designers for Remington. So that's a lot of the brain power behind what this gun is. So in 1931, it was introduced, and it would run inline until 1949. And then famously in 1950, the Remington 870 was introduced, and which has become probably the most selling, most popular shotgun, slide action shotgun in history, with a probable close second on the Mossberg 500, which is kind of related to this gun in a way too. So it all comes, it's just like a shoebox full of hamsters. You never know what you're going to get when you open the top of it. Anyway, the Model 31 Remington is the first side ejection shotgun that Remington ever made. It was available in 12, 16, and 20 gauge. No 28s, no 410s. And there were, according to the research I've done, 189,243 total made of these guns. The vast majority of which, well over half of which, are 12 gauge. 40,312 16 gauges and 31,192 in 20 gauge. And this is a 20 gauge. So the 20 gauge is the much less common of the gauges in the Model 31 line. So when these guns were introduced, it didn't take long for the field, and the field gun originally had checkered stocks and a more, a little bit longer forend with checkering on it, but it didn't take long for them to go to this ribbed forend. And almost immediately, it was introduced in 12 gauge in 31, and then in 33 it was in 16 and 20 gauge. And during that time, they started introducing all these different grade levels and submodels, the tournament grade, the skeet grade, the trap grade, premier grades up through F. There were riot guns. There was never a trench gun, but there were riot guns designed for military use, things like that. So there's 35 different variations and grades of this Model 31. So that's a pretty fertile collecting field, even with just less than 200,000 made. It may be, it would be significant, I guess, to try to gather up a representative example of all these different grades, with some of them being quite rare. So if you think about the 20 gauge guns, with only a total of 30-something thousand made, if you were to get a tournament grade or a trap grade or a skeet gun in 20 gauge, that would be a lot harder to get than, say, the 30-inch full 12 gauge gun. So anyway, there's a lot of collectability there. Law enforcement used them. The military bought a little less than 9,000 of these guns. And although they weren't used as trench guns like the Model 12 or the Model 1897, they were used to train aerial gunners to teach them how to lead a flying target, things of that nature. And those are marked. They will have the U.S. marking. They will have the flaming bomb on them. And those, with provenance, I guess, if you can get provenance with it, tend to increase the value of those guns too. So there's a military aspect to the Model 31 as well, although not a combat aspect necessarily. It was certainly used in the training of aerial gunners anyway. So in 1939, factories began offering the gun with a factory-installed cuts compensator on the end, and in 1940. They had their own polychoke, an aerodyne polychoke in 1940. So in 1941, they made some slight changes to the internals, and everything became new and improved. It was a new improved 31 skeet, the new improved 31, all these other different grades. So it wasn't marked new and improved on the gun, but in 1941 there were some slight changes to the internals. But also in 41 is when they introduced this aluminum frame gun. So one of the cons, I guess, of the 31, particularly in the sub gauges, is it's pretty heavy with its all steel construction. So they introduced this aluminum alloy gun in 12, 16, and 20 gauge. And they called it Aeromet, this particular alloy. It was A-E-R-O-M-E-T, Aeromet. I have no idea where or how they came up with that name, but that's what it was called. So the level of fit and finish was still there. And that's one of the things about the Model 31, is all of these parts, the internal parts were so finely fitted and nicely fitted that it's one of the smoothest operating slide actions ever. And in fact, even in the marketing advertising of the time, Remington sort of touted that the gun ran on ball bearings. Now, there's no ball bearings in the action or anything like that, but it's certainly a super, super smooth running shotgun. So probably more so than the Model 12. And I'm a Model 12 guy from years and years and years and years back. So I do like my Model 12s, but I will say the 31 is a super, super smooth action. So that said, there are some potential problems and some cons of a Model 31, one of which it only has the one action slide. It only has the one action slide bar here instead of two. And interestingly enough, in 1950, when the 870 was introduced, it started with two action bars. But, some people claim that to be a major problem. There's never been a Model 12 Winchester with two action bars. The Ithaca 37 doesn't have 2 action bars. It's not that big a deal. Is it easier to torque the handle when you operate the action? Yeah, it is. But that's a training and operator issue more than it is really a gun issue. So I don't consider that a major problem at all. Parts for the 31 can be somewhat challenging to obtain. Again, 200,000 guns isn't all that many, so there aren't a ton of them out there. And a lot of these parts are very much gauge specific, so finding parts for that 20 gauge gun is going to be a lot more difficult. If you break a tip off the action slide bar, a talented gunsmith may be able to micro weld that bar back together, maybe, maybe not. We've had some luck doing that on some of the Weatherby Patrician series guns. I've never tried to do it on a 31, but the process should still be the same anyway. So, what is this gun similar to? When you read, if you just spend some time cruising around on forums, you'll say, oh, it's just like the Model 17 Remington or the Model 37 Ithaca, and it's really not. Obviously, it's a side eject shotgun, but there are some similarities between the two. You see, it has the open carrier. It has the open carrier here. This is actually more similar to the Mossberg 500 than it is the Ithaca 37. But the takedown feature, it's not really a takedown gun. The barrel's designed to be removed for storage. It's very much like the older Remington 17, the Ithaca 37. You actually just back that in so you can see that it's clearing the lug on the barrel. You pull the action bar back to remove the extractor from its notch here. Just turn the barrel a quarter turn, and it's just an interrupted thread pattern here, just like you would find on the Ithaca 37. So it's not truly a takedown like the Model 12. The Model 12, the magazine tube, the entire front half of the gun comes off on the Model 12 Winchester, and this is just the barrel coming off. Now, unlike the Remington 870, it is not really an interchangeable barrel gun. Can you make it happen? Yeah, probably can. The barrel's actually serialized to the receiver. You could send the gun back into Remington and they would fit another barrel, and it could be serialized to the barrel of to the serial number on the receiver. So you can find multiple barrel sets, 30-inch full, 26-inch improved cylinder, whatever the deal is. You're not going to find it varying in gauge, however, for sure. So this particular gun is January of 1948. And how do we know that? Well, it's going to be super hard to see, but right here on the side of the barrel, that's typically where Remington's going to date code the gun. So we have, but with my feeble eyes, it looks like a B and then 2 T's, which would be January of 1948, which is consistent with a 31L for sure. So, and it is serialized. This gun is barrel is serialized here. So that would be one thing to look at when you're evaluating a 31. Take the barrel off, see if it's serialized to the frame. So it probably still shoots well if the gun runs with a mismatched barrel, but just know that it's not the same barrel that's on there. So let's talk about where the Lineage went with this gun. So you see, again, we see the references to the Model 37, but the Model 37 is more direct descendant of the Remington 17, not the 31. But if you look at, there's a ton of similarities with the Mossberg 500 product, which obviously came very much after this gun. Both the Mossberg 500 product and the high standard Flight King or the M200 guns are similar in design to this. Now, that's not saying they're a copy. That's not saying it's the same thing. I'm saying that the people at Mossberg looked and said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do our version of that. So, and again, this is not our gun, so I'm not going to take it apart further than this. Gary, I'm not taking your gun apart. But we will talk about some of the stuff that's similar to that Mossberg 500. So a lot of people, when they start to try to take this trigger guard unit out of the gun, they think that's a pin. It is not. These are the shell stops. This pin here has a large end and a small end, so there's really only one way that guy's going to come out. It's going to come out from right to left. And when that pin is out, this trigger group moves forward until the two ears on the trigger group fit into these notches here. The trigger group comes straight out. So that's very similar to how the Mossberg 500 trigger group has two ears on the front of it, dovetails into the receiver, and then pivots in for the single pin on the Mossberg 500. So you can see a little bit of lineage there. Two shell stops, one on each side of the receiver, and these are the pivot points of those shell stops. Very similar to a Mossberg 500, although on the 500 the hole doesn't come through all the way. The carrier, or the lifter on this gun, has two ears that fit into recesses on the side of the receiver about right here, exactly where a Mossberg 500 does, except the Mossberg 500 hole, the hole comes through and you can see the carrier studs there. So the parts don't interchange. They're just similar in design. I guess that's probably the best way to look at it. So you can see that there is some similarity there, and for a good reason. This is a super nice running shotgun. They're very, very slick to operate. And the only thing that really killed them off is that they're expensive to make, and they're because of all the fitting involved in this shotgun. They were very expensive, and they actually were more expensive on the retail end than the Model 12. So it kind of is what it is. And post World War II, everybody, Remington included, was trying to be more cost effective at the retail end for the hunting and sporting shotguns. So the 870 came about, cheaper to manufacture, still ran well, still a super smooth shotgun, and the Model 31 was discontinued at that point. The Winchester 12 kept soldiering on until the 60s before they finally threw the towel in on that gun also, just from a cost standpoint. So what do we look for on a 31? Well, it's the same. We've talked about it, I think, in every one of these videos so far. Originality, scarcity, and condition, right? So this is a 31L aluminum receiver. It's an anodized finish instead of bluing. So, and this is typical wear pattern that you see on that. So what we would look for on a 31L, now note that this is not marked 31L, it's only marked Model 31. The fact that it is an aluminum receiver designates it as a 31L. I have seen a marked 31L, and the other 34 grades and variations of this gun may or may not be marked with a T or a C or an S, or whichever version it is. So you have to take the overall configuration of the gun to determine which exact model that you have. So we look, and obviously nobody's going to re-anodize the gun. So it would be, obviously, if it's Cerakoted or Alumiguard or whatever paint product, you'll know that it's been messed with. But we can see that the markings are all very clear. We don't see where anybody's taken a punch and missed anything that they were trying to punch through and caused extra holes or divots in here. So we're pretty happy with the overall condition of the metal of the receiver on this gun. So when we look at the steel parts in 1948, or in fact the entire production run of the Model 31, nothing was hot blued. They were all rust blued. So you would expect to see this matte finish, blue-black, actually, kind of more blackish metal or steel barrel on a 31. If you ever saw that high polish, even on the premier grades, even on the high grades, you wouldn't see that high glossy blue finish that you would see on a modern hot blued gun. So that's a dead giveaway that the gun is reblued. So also on the 31, you have all these patent markings up on the top portion of the barrel. Obviously, they're not there if you have a solid rib gun. And then the markings here on the side for the gauge markings and the various proof markings and the serial number here. So when people go and polish these guns on a wheel, they tend to lose the integrity of these markings. So look at the tails of the letters, look at the tails of the numbers, and see if they've been rubbed away or polished away by a polishing wheel and then reblued. So It is possible to re-rust blue a gun. It's not a huge issue. If we were to do to refinish this gun in a rust blue, that would be done with a fine oxide grit, and then rust blued again. So that can be done. It can look fairly original. So the wood finish on these guns were a lacquer finish. This is a typical wear pattern that you would see here. These white lines, this edge wear on this aluminum receiver, that is absolutely normal edge wear on a gun that's 75 years old now. So all in all, this is a super aesthetically in good shape shotgun. So one of the things that we need to look at on the 31, the ejector in this gun, I doubt you're going to be seeing it on camera, but the ejector on this gun is what we call a loose ejector. It's not pinned into the side of the receiver. It's not held in place by anything other than the bolt itself. So the bolt is holding that ejector into its recess in the frame in the side of the receiver, and there's a coil spring that powers this. The Model 12 ejector is held in its receiver similarly, but it's powered by a leaf spring that's that's kind of dovetailed into the ejector piece itself. So this has a coil spring that's under it. So you need to, when you're looking at a 31, make sure that that lip on the ejector is still there, the ejector itself is not broken, and make sure that you have spring tension under here. It's not difficult to replace. It can be a little finicky to get it back into place because you have to hold this guy in position while you put the bolt back in after you remove the carrier and everything else. So that can be kind of a fiddly bit to get back in there, but it can be done. So other than that, you should always watch for cracks here in the wrist of the stock. Sometimes the through bolt will come loose on these guns just through use, or somebody doesn't tighten it back up correctly, and the recoil will start to crack this stock up. So that's one of the issues about this gun in 12 gauge and the 31L, the lightweight gun, is it's great to carry it around, but it's, you know, if you're going to shoot a couple of boxes of shells, you're going to feel it at the end of the day. So what would you expect to pay for a 31L? Or a 31 in general. So the prices are all over the place. It depends on remember, 35 different variations, right? So a field grade gun, this gun, in a 31 is going to be in the 400s typically. 31Ls about the same money, even though there were fewer of them. They for some reason, at least from what I've been able to see, they don't bring a real premium for that. So where the premium guns are the higher grade guns. When you start getting into skeet and trap and TC and tournament and any martially marked guns, any guns that are marked for prison use, any of those riot guns that are police department marked, they can bring a bit of a premium, particularly if they're geographically relevant to where you are. So for example, here in Southeast Texas, if we could come up with a 31 Riot that was marked for a Texas Police Department, it would be worth more here than it would, say, to somebody in Maryland. So that said, the Remington 31, there's a huge variety of those guns out there. Just this particular model could be a significant collection if you were able to obtain even a half of the number of variations out there. It would make for a substantial and impressive collection. So that's the 31L from 1941 through 49 is when the aluminum guns were made, but the 31 was from 31 forward to 49. So if you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We try to push out this kind of stuff as often as we can. So far, we're keeping to our schedule of once a week at least, and we're going to keep doing that as long as there's cool stuff to talk about. And there really is. We've got stuff. We're going to do Mossberg 500. We're going to do Winchester 12. We're going to do Winchester 70. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff out there that's on the books that are going to be recorded. So drop us a comment. We read them. We respond to them. If you have something that you'd like us to talk about, by all means, let us know, and we'll try to get that done for you. So thanks for stopping by, as always, and have a good day.